My dad sold the house I inherited and said, "The money will go to pay off your brother's vacation." I laughed, and a week later, when my lawyer called him, I laughed because the alternative would have been to ask him to repeat himself, and I didn't trust my voice not to splinter if I did. He said it the way people say they've moved a dentist appointment. Like, managerial. As if the house were an old sofa I'd left in the garage. Not the thing my aunt had deliberately put in my name because she'd watched me be the careful one my whole life. "I already sold it," my dad said. "The money will go to pay off your brother's vacation." Vacation. Singular, like a concept. Like rest itself had accrued debt. I laughed once, short, involuntary. He paused, misreading it as agreement. That laugh was the last spontaneous sound I made for a while. After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and did something I'd learned to do young. I took stock without dramatizing. No pacing. No texts. Just facts. The deed. The will. The emails where my aunt spelled it out plainly because she knew how people like my father interpreted ambiguity as permission. The house was small. One bathroom. A lemon tree in the back that never quite thrived. I didn't have grand plans for it. That was the point. It wasn't leverage or an investment strategy. It was an acknowledgement that I existed independently of family calculus. My brother had always needed more. More help, more forgiveness, more just this once. I was the one who made things work around that. I became fluent in delay. When I objected, I was told to be patient. When I succeeded, it was assumed I could absorb the inconvenience. So when my dad sold something that wasn't his and framed it as a necessity, I recognized the pattern instantly. This wasn't theft in his mind. It was redistribution. I didn't call him back. That felt important not as a tactic but as a boundary. Instead, I called a lawyer recommended by a coworker who'd gone through an inheritance dispute. I said the words calmly. I didn't editorialize. The lawyer didn't react much either, which was oddly comforting. There's a particular relief in speaking to someone who doesn't need to be convinced you matter. The days that followed were quiet. I went to work, cooked, I slept. Anger stayed with me, but it wasn't volcanic. It was dense like weather. I let it exist without giving it the wheel. A week later, my phone rang. The lawyer told me they'd made contact. There had been issues with the title transfer. The sale funds were being held pending clarification. Words like unauthorized and fiduciary breach floated by, not dramatic, just precise. "Do you want me to proceed?" she asked. "Yes," I said. Came out clean. I didn't hear from my dad until that evening. He left a voicemail. His voice was louder than usual, pitched higher. He sounded offended by the inconvenience of law itself. "There's been some kind of mistake," he said. "Your lawyer is causing problems. We can sort this out as a family." I noticed what he didn't say. He didn't say I'm sorry. He didn't say I was wrong. He said mistake as if gravity had misfiled paperwork. I didn't return the call. Silence had changed for me. It was no longer absence. It was structure. Over the next few days, the shape of the truth hardened. The buyer backed out. The funds remained inaccessible. The vacation, whatever version of it had already been promised, suddenly had no narrative to sit in. My brother texted once. Just a question mark. I didn't answer that either. The lawyer explained my options. None of them involved public spectacle. None required me to humiliate anyone. They were procedural, incremental, the kind of power that doesn't announce itself. When my dad finally called again, his tone had shifted. Not softer, exactly, more careful. He talked about intentions, about misunderstandings, about how he'd only ever tried to do what was best for everyone. I listened. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I told him I'd be communicating through my lawyer going forward. There was a long pause. I imagined him standing in his kitchen, the way he always did during phone calls, one hand braced on the counter as if he were explaining something reasonable to the room itself. "This is extreme," he said. "No," I replied. "It's appropriate." That was the moment control changed hands. Not loudly, not with a slam. It was administrative. It was dull. And it was undeniable. The house wasn't magically restored to some sentimental glow. It was still just a structure with aging pipes and a stubborn tree. But it was legally mine again, in a way that could not be overridden by someone else's urgency. The relationship didn't recover. It recalibrated. I stopped being available for redistribution. My father learned, slowly, that my laughter had not been permission. I didn't feel victorious. I felt aligned. There's a difference. Sometimes I think about that laugh, how early it arrived, how much it knew. It wasn't humor. It was recognition. The sound a person makes when they finally see the boundary, clear and solid, waiting to be enforced.